Kylie. I really appreciate it. My alarm went off at 4:47. I pressed snooze. It was lovely. Really excited about this session. I say that every month because they're all very good. Do a little test up. Who here is from a not-for-profit? Whoa. Who here is from a for-profit business? I love it. Welcome, David. Welcome, Darlene. So I would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the land of the Awabakal people. I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and incoming. So thank you. Today's we're doing this transition at the moment, and it's and we haven't talked too much about it, but it's a very, very exciting transition. And so part of this transition is these beautiful humans that I am surrounded by: Donna George, Lewis, Marissa Wilson, Michelle's part of it, the Big Secret Club, Kylie Daniels, and then beautiful Nikki Wright, whose son's not well, so she wasn't here today. And Kim Britton is also unwell and has been for a little while. He's all part of this new thing. So I actually haven't done anything. I'll send you an email this month, which is ridiculous. Can I have a clap for that? So I'm just very excited about what's coming and what we're building, and just love and want to acknowledge each and every one of those that are supporting this process. Today was Marissa's idea. Sorry about that. It's her fault if it's bad, just kidding. But what I would like to do is that our breakfasts are proudly supported by Beyond Bank, the wonderful Kylie Daniels. So I will get Kylie up here to just tell you how fabulous she is. Just, you know. But if you want a coffee, like a free one, just call her. Because you know, if you broke 1 week and you're like, oh, I need a coffee, just call her and she'll.
That's what we call grants and coffee. Yeah, I can do that. Welcome everybody, and for those of you who don't know Beyond Bank, we're a customer-owned bank. We've been around for over 60 years. We've rebranded in 2013. But what makes us unique is that we don't have shareholders. Our customers are our shareholders. So any profits we make, we get to derive back to the community. We do that quite willingly, and we do that with pride. And in fact, sponsoring NFP breakfast since 2015. The premise for them is connecting, and how wonderful these events can be to just build connections, build some friendships, and I'm very excited to see what's coming. I can't hang around today because I double booked some braces being installed on my daughter's teeth today, but I will get Grace to pass my details on. If anyone is interested in what we do, and particularly live in the space of grants and partnerships and sponsorships, and a few in the room are aware of that, just, yeah, pop me an email and we'll have a coffee. Yeah.
So it's very low key here, as you can tell. We've got braces and sickness and all the fun things. Just kidding. So I will now leave it over to Marissa. I'm so excited. She's presenting. I've been trying to get her to do this for like 10 years, seriously. Sorry, no pressure. So this is a beautiful Marissa Wilson. Marissa's very well known. If you ever need to know anyone in our community, between her and I, probably Kim Britton and Donna George, we've got it covered as far as the not-for-profit. But she's also just one of these humans that there's no competition, and she will help you no matter what. So if you do need to know anything, give her a call too, but you'll have to pay for coffee if you call her. Thank you.
Welcome everybody, and I'll let Martin and Jillian can actually sit down before I introduce you, because I can see Jenny over there. I want to thank Grace for doing the acknowledgement this morning. I'm just going to add something to that, and this is a preempt of another topic that we're going to actually look at doing a breakfast on, and that is our embedding our cultural competency. And I know that's probably a topical thing at the moment. A lot of people are going through accreditation and looking at how we do that. But this I've stolen it from Headspace, and I don't think anyone here is from Headspace, but it's on their website. And the focus here is on clients and the people that we serve, and that's NFT space and business space. I think it's all about making our clients and our customers feel welcome. We pay our respects to elders past and present and are committed to making a positive contribution to the well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people by providing services that are welcoming, safe, culturally appropriate and inclusive. And I think that's a very important message that we give out there. So look out for that topic coming up later in the year, and hopefully you can all come along to that one as well. But just getting on to today's topic. One of the things about NFT Connect is about finding local experts and connecting them. And even though there's a 2-degree separation of everybody in Newcastle, and we know that, sometimes we don't know who's in our own backyard that we can call upon and get to come and assist us in our work every day. And we've got 2 experts with us today, and I'm hoping that you'll maybe look at them later on after we leave today as people that you can talk to and maybe their brains and engage even for your funding and needs. So just a quick introduction, if you like, for our 2 people, but I will let them speak for themselves as well. We have Jillian Nelson. Now, Jillian is the National Client Engagement Manager at Tender Plus Consulting. Now, Tender Plus assists businesses and non-government organisations to pursue and win competitive business. She was previously the Senior Business Development Manager for the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, and here she explored commercial opportunities outside of grant funding. So she's played on, I guess, both sides of the fence, and she has been in the NFT world, and particularly looking outside of what I would call the traditional funding in the grants tenders. And I think that's the expertise that she brings today, and she will talk about, because for us, it's very important not to get caught in that box and to look outside that box as to where else we can get sustainable funding. We also have Martin McKenzie with us. Martin is an advisor and mentor at the Business Centre, and a lot of you already know Martin. He has a wealth of knowledge and experience in assisting startup businesses and accessing government grants and incentives. He is an expert in helping businesses to deal effectively with government grants, having worked in that space previously. I'll also add he's an expert in, or has expertise in small business, including NFTs, and community engagement and strategic planning. And I think all of those elements combined make him a very useful resource. So no matter what your size or what your industry that you are in. So the format of today is we'll kick off. I'm going to start with Jillian and ask her a few questions, and she's going to impart knowledge to us. Then we'll do the same with Martin, and then we'll round up with some generic questions for both of them that might help you as well. But also then the floor will be open for you to ask questions, and I encourage you to do that because you've got them here and you might as well pick their brains while you can. So Jillian, have you seen a change in competitive tenders for non-government organisations?
Thanks, Melissa, and hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Yes, there's definitely been a change. I think that what we're noticing through our business is that there is the pool of money that was for not-for-profits is much smaller than it used to be, and there's a lot more not-for-profits that are competing for business at the moment as well. So if you're not competitive in what you're putting forward, then unfortunately you're not being successful, and so that's definitely something that we're seeing.
Okay. And do you have any handy tips for the businesses in the room? And when I'm talking businesses, I'm talking both sides of the fence, because tenders, remember, are not just for NFTs, but also a lot of business tenders out there as well. On winning tenders, and what differentiates a successful bid from those who miss out?
Yes, so I've got a few tips. I wrote some notes down, but probably my number one tip would be when you're looking, you need to look at, well, one, what's your strategy and how you're going to respond. But you need to look at what the government's trying to achieve. Most of them are government, if that's who, or the client, and what they're trying to achieve, and try and work out, well, what's my mission and what are we doing, but how do I take that and it's going to add value to what they're trying to achieve. So rather than trying to fit your mission into what they want, you try and have to think from like client centric in everything that you do, so that it's coming from their viewpoint as to how this is going to add value for them. From a tender, you have to be strategic, you need to be compliant, and then you have to make that compelling. And so if you don't have those three things, if one of those are missing, then you won't win. So that's probably our number one: strategic, compliant, and then compelling. Sometimes we take information that we've already got and we just try and use that to answer. And that doesn't necessarily work. You need to make sure that you're answering the question correctly. And sometimes we can miss that in tenders. Even just before you talked about the Indigenous side of things, nearly all tenders will have a question around Indigenous. How do you support that? They'll have environmental questions, things like that. So you have to potentially can build up a library bank of those sorts of answers, but you need to make sure that you're then replying from what the actual specific question is that they've asked you.
Okay, and from your NSP work with the Opportunties Research Institute, you found novel ways to generate funding outside of grants and tenders. And can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think that's of interest to everybody and what they should be doing. Yeah.
So the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, has anyone heard of it? Yeah, so they are based in Melbourne. They're pretty amazing. They're number 3 in the world for medical research. So out of everywhere in the world for child medical research, we have number 3 in Australia here. There's about 3,000 clinicians that work there, and they work frontline in the Royal Children's Hospital and then also in medical research. And so there's a link between, which is really cool. So they see things that are happening on the front line and they bring it into the research institute and try and see if they can improve health outcomes. And so my role was to look at, there's this great research that comes in, but how do we look at using that research once the research paper's been written, and not just putting it on the shelf and going, let's think about it commercially, and is there something that we can create from a product point of view, or is there a way that we can create funding? So I'll use an example of a product that I helped with. It was called Head Check, or is called Head Check. It's a concussion app. So children come into the ER, they've had a fall, head knock, and parents don't necessarily know how to tell the signs and symptoms of it, but they also then don't know how to monitor them for the next couple of weeks. And so one of the things we saw was reoccurring children coming back in with head injuries and so forth. And so they did some research around it. I could see that there was a growing problem in the sporting community around concussion as well. And so we talked to a wealthy family office that came in, and we got them to seed fund. And then we went to the AFL, and I talked to the AFL, and they came on board as a partner as well. And we created an app that is all around monitoring for concussion. So if anyone's got small children, it's a great app. It should be on your phone. Even if you're in the community and someone has a fall, you can do a quick check to see what they think, and it will triage you as to whether you need to see the GP or go to emergency and so forth. But then it basically holds your hand through the recovery over the next couple of weeks. But what we did by doing that was we generated income through the AFL for support, because we knew that that was something that they had a need for. And then we also, we used this family office that we knew wanted to support the research institute. So there's people out there, I guess, that, they have different values and different ideas of what they want to support. But if you can get that aligned with what you're doing, then that's really helpful. So
it's about thinking more strategic rather than just waiting for the right funding to come along and land in your lap, is to go out and look for it and have those conversations.
Yeah, so create another example would be, I was talking to Martin about this before, where I was living in Victoria. The Victorian government pledged some money towards sleep and settling. They said this was coming. I did have a little bit of a look into where this money was coming through from the government. And instead of waiting for a grant or a tender, I actually went and spoke to them. We had heaps of information around this in the institute, and it's all evidence-based. And so I said to them, I had a coffee with the guy. I just said, look, we've got all of this information. You need to get it from somewhere. Wouldn't it be great if it was evidence-based? Because sleep is such a messy area. There's so much information about it. And I just said to him, you know, what's your budget for content? And he just looked at me and said, I can't tell you that. And I was like, well, if you don't tell me, I won't tell you how much I'm charging. And he just laughed and said, you're making me show my cards. And then, yeah, so he told me, and I did a licensing agreement. So we had 250,000 5-year agreement for licensing for content. So that's content that was already there, was sitting there, and I had to just think about it outside of the square in order to be able to create that. But that just was sustainable funding then that came from, we didn't have to apply it to anything else. So.
And I think that's the same aim for most people, is that to get that sustainable income source rather than rely on the grants that may or may not appear. It just gives you that little bit more stability moving forward.
Exactly. And you can spend the money then on what you want. It doesn't, like, you can put it back into the program, back into research and so forth.
Okay. And do you think other non-profits can benefit from a stronger commercial and business development mindset?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what the Research Institute did. So they didn't have anybody like me. I didn't come from a not-for-profit or a grant research background. I came from a competitive business. I started my career here in NIB in Newcastle many moons ago. And I've just moved back to Newcastle after 12 years of being away. So it's very exciting to be back. But it totally, like, if you need to think from a competitive point of view, you need to think commercially. And so even when you're applying for a tender, you have to think about the commercial outset, or even a grant, of what that's going to be, like what you will get commercially out of it, but also what they will get. And that will help from a business development, like developing those businesses. But also if you can try and like create relationships before those grants and tenders drop as well. If you've got those relationships, that helps definitely.
Okay, and some extra bits and pieces to that. So we'll talk a little bit about grant writing as well. And I think for most people, grants are either your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on, you know, which way you tackle it. What are your top tips for grant writing?
First of all, grants best friend or enemy? Is anyone best friend? Best friend? I have a list too. Jillian had a list. Didn't even look at hers, so she's making me look really bad already. But I do have a list, and I understand completely, both in the not-for-profit and the for-profit commercial. It's hard. It's really, really hard. And I've worked for the federal government. I've worked in the private sector, and I've also worked for myself in the States. And I've been on the determination side of things and on the writing side of things. And it's either going to break your heart or give you lots of joy. By the way, it requires management some way. But some of this is not your fault, because the grant's message is like this. But in reality, the eligibility part is like that. So it's we have grants, but in reality, the eligibility side really narrows it down and makes it difficult for you. And in the not-for-profit section, there are more organisations and less money in the bucket often, depending on the sector. That's pretty much across the board. I will have to consult my list, Jillian. All right. But something that Jillian said, and it's at the top of my list, is actually not about you. It's actually more about the funding body that's trying to actually give you the money. And what do they want? And what are their missions? And what are their outcomes? So if you can think more about that and pivot your writing towards that, you'll have a bit more success. But you've got to be prepared. Just spoke to a lady earlier from Gardens. She's doing it on her own. Don't do this on your own. You can't do it on your own. You need a team around you. Spoke to a board of 12 last week, and there was one person writing the grant, which is insane. That person was afraid and stressed. So we need to have a bit of a team approach around. If you have a board, we need people with that board activated and helping the people looking for grants. Can't just be one person. They need support Is that agreed? Has anyone seen that problem in their own boards? Yep, hands up, perfect. The place you look for grants pretty much the same as Jillian, different forms of funding, collaborations, partnerships, anything like that that's not just grants should be part of your strategy going forward. Relying on grants is just going to break your heart every time. Now, I know in the creative space, there are multi-year grants, but even they are not guaranteed. So after that 3 or 5 years that they're around, you never know what's going to happen next, and then you're scrambling again for the next tranche. So you have to make sure you're prepared for that. Look, I've written, look, I started out with 5 top tips, then it went to 10, and now it's 20. So that's what it's like. And the more I wrote, the more I kept thinking about how much you have to be prepared for this stuff in the grants world. Basically, if you're in a not-for-profit world, they'll normally be partitioned out into than they would be to the commercial world. So different areas where you look for funding, grant funding. And I guess there are actually NGIS isn't an example that this is not the case. Also the creative arts, also you find in both spots as well. At the moment, obviously, we're dealing with a lot of grants still around flood, now around mice, believe it or not. So management of mice. So we've had drought, fire, flood, storm, now mice. We're just missing volcanoes and rivers of blood. You should be yeah. Read the guidelines first before you do anything else, and always use the contact point within the grant. They'll always say, have you read the guidelines? So make sure you do that first before you actually bring the number. I don't care if you have a random question to have with that random contact. Just have something to ask them. Get on the radar, ask them a question, make sure that they know about you as well. Never try and shoehorn your project into a grant bucket. You just end up being disappointed. So don't try and push something that you've got planned into a grant that you've found. It happens a lot. Not your fault again. That is just basically indicative of how much pressure there are on not-for-profits to try and get funding. So just remember that as a rule. You'll just be disappointed. Get feedback if your grant is unsuccessful. It's really important. So sometimes it's offered, sometimes it's not, depending on the org. So try and get some feedback on where you're wrong if you can. You guys will have words somewhere. You'll have mission statements, you'll have business plans, you'll have something like that. So there's lots of content and words that you already have. Use that as a base for some of the narrative within the grants. Just save yourself some time. But remember, it has to still align with the questions as well. Really good point from Jillian about the compliance piece, the governance piece as well. It has to be covered off within your, because there will be questions, inclusion questions, questions about governance, those kind of things. You have to have that covered off as well. So everyone likes to read the top bit about, yes, you can get $10,000, but no one reads back through on the governance piece and then the management of the grant once you get it, if you get it, to make sure you actually have your milestones down and you've managed the grant correctly at the end. And do you have a history of that? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Look, I could probably make these available to you because there is a lot and I can't go through them. I'll just take too much time. Okay, we'll do. Yeah. And for anyone who's interested as well, I've actually developed a process map on this. It's not ready yet, but it's basically a bit of a sequence map on how to go for applying for grants.
Is that of interest to people as well? Yes, lots of knowledge heads. Okay. Can I just touch back on when you were talking about the resources to manage a grant internally? Is that something that people really should think about?
100%. Pretty, it's a yes answer. It's a closed question.
That was my tip 3 that I didn't answer.
At least.
Did you get that?
So yes, and you know, coming from that NFP space, and I know a lot of you will know the grant and the funding looks great, and then the management of that grant and the amount of resources it takes internally, you need to make sure that you've weighed that up, and that you know it's a cost-effective way of getting money. Basically,
it may hamper you in future applications if it's not done properly.
And I'm just reading one of those tips is that grants should be part of a larger funding strategy around income and services and should always be weighed up with operating costs, etc.
So I think that's a very key point for everybody to take away, that grants aren't necessarily always the answer to the problem, and that, you know, and as both of our speakers have said, it's about looking outside of that and seeing what else or how else you can get your project funded or get money into the organisations to do what you set out to do as part of your mission. Okay, back to my questions. Now, those tips, can they apply to both NFPs and for-profit businesses?
Yeah, for sure. It actually, excuse me, also applies if you're writing for tenders. You've really got to have your narrative down. You know, you're basically making a case for yourself, and that would count if you with a for-profit, commercial or not-for-profit.
And a question, I guess, for both of you, should you be prepared with a range of options, if you like, that are ready to go, or should, you know, a lot of the grants in terms of coming out now are knee-jerk reactions, like mice playing, but, you know, should there be something sitting in the background rather than starting from scratch on a knee-jerk reaction?
Yeah, most companies or large companies have what they call a library. And so they write these libraries that are sitting there and that they can pull things depending on what they're applying for. So that's something that our organisation helps with. A lot of the time we get a bit stuck on, which as we've both said, trying to talk about our mission. So it's writing that so that it's compelling and it's compliant and it's strategic as well. So, but having it there, so you can't just automatically put that straight from the library into that box. You have to make sure that you're still answering those three things.
Yeah, also, I also recommend that not-for-profits have projects on the shelf ready to go, bundled up, budgeted, the whole thing. Having said that, I know that not-for-profits are time for, and they're working with all the volunteers who are just doing it for love of it. So I know that's always easy to do that.
Is it though also a strategy because they're time for that if they've already done the background work, it's not so much of a stress to get that tendering or that granting on time?
Yeah. Every not-for-profit has a couple of drivers who are like a real engine rooms, and they do a lot of work. Sometimes when they go, and that knowledge becomes transient, it's good to have what they've done through their time captured somehow. So it's always really great when people come through and you're using their skill set, that you capture some of that in the form of a project or an idea or something you can form up.
Excellent. Okay, so some questions for both of you, more generic type questions. What would be your best tips on how to get your organisation's name out there to seek collaborations for tenders and grants locally, no matter what your size? Because we know that, particularly with the government stuff at the moment, collaboration is their hit buzzword. And they want to see that collaboration. So particularly for our smaller players in the room, how do you get to be part of that?
Yeah, I guess network. That's my biggest, network, talk to people, explain to people what you're doing, standard business development, try and have somebody in your business that's out and about and talking about what you do, and look at government, see if you can form relationships, just form those relationships wherever you can. You might not get to the right person in the first go. You might need to, meet a couple of people before you get there. But the more you're out and doing that, the bigger your network will become. And that's how I'm here today. I met Kimberly, and Kimberly recommended me, and that's how it happens, I guess. So, and the best, make sure you've keep your integrity intact, and people will they'll trust you and recommend you.
It's noisy out there, and you've got to sort of get your arms up higher than everybody else. So I agree with the marketing side of things and promoting yourself well. Your branding should be on point and quite good. And again, I know that people are time poor and poor in general as far as the organisation coffers go. So it's easy to say it, but I have been on the board of not-for-profit, so I did get it, understand. Think a bit more laterally about your partnerships. I think sometimes helps as well. Don't just go to the obvious one that everyone goes to. Everyone has support. Everyone has to become support. You mentioned they must have a lock on their door or something like that to keep people away. So there's a whole bunch of people who have just become natural targets There's a whole bunch of other orgs out there who probably love to partner with you. I'm not sure if I wanted to mention auspicing here, but that's a great way to actually form a relationship with for-profit commercial companies as well.
And do you want to just explain for everybody what that involves?
Okay, yes, I'll give it a shot. Yeah. So the idea of auspicing is that if you're a for-profit commercial, everyone would have heard the terms at the moment: social enterprise, profit for purpose, benefit corporations. All things that we're starting to hear more about now. Just quietly, the government doesn't understand what those terms are, and they don't mean anything to the government. Just so you know, it's actually branding and badging. B Corp is a bit different. That's a registration, like an ethics that you sign up to do. So if you're wanting to do one of those businesses, you require some social license or something like that, and you find a project that you would like to do, but you can't apply for that through funding because you're for-profit, you can find yourself a not-for-profit and they can auspice the funds for you. Councils do this a lot. There's no reason why other not-for-profits can't do it for you. Well, I know Octopod, my old org, does it for other creatives.
So does everybody know about that and understand that as such?
Not really.
Yeah, so in an auspicing situation, it's clearly not about making money. It's something a for-profit business can get involved with, and they can run their project in their social enterprise space. And they could probably help pay someone's wage. It's good to have a partnership within the not-for-profit so they can maybe get someone in to come and do, if it's salary based, if not, to find another way. I'm not explaining this very well, completely aware, because one of my ears is going red. So it means I probably should maybe have a one-to-one conversation.
Yeah, lots of corporates now are trying to work out how they can fit into this, like help not-for-profits or, you know, have an impact back to community and so forth. And so they do it in different ways. Some might, like, let's use NRB Health Funds, for instance, they've created a foundation where they give grants and so forth back to the community. Some organisations, what they'll do is they'll actually give employees time. And so they'll give you expertise and they'll partner with you to, put their data analyst in there that can help you look at, have I made a competitive pricing option under this grant, and so they'll help you to be able to win business. It's great for them reputationally, and it helps you as well. So, and that's part of that networking and getting out there and talking about what you do.
I think also for some grants for not-for-profits, there is criteria about being a PBI or, and small organisations may not qualify for it, but you can partner with an organisation that does qualify and go in together and actually fit in under it. So it may be your project, you're delivering it, but if you partner with somebody who fits the criteria and they can apply on behalf of you and work together, that is another way of not only strengthening your application, because now it's a collaboration, but actually allowing you to apply for that funding, whereas maybe you were cut out of that before. So that all comes under that auspices, if you like. But yes, the same with corporates can do that as well, is partner with someone who does fit the criteria, who can apply for the grant, and you partner together and do it that way.
Probably field about 2 inquiries a week about people wanting to set up a not-for-profit. So we can be in corporate association, we can be limited by guarantee, registering as a charity, TGR status. If they can't deal with that information, they should just maybe go away and rethink what they're trying to do. So the people in the room have already set their organisations up. You should actually pat yourself on the back because it's a lot to go through, and you should wear that as a badge, but also don't wear it as a chip on your shoulder at the same time. So, get out there and be competitive.
And explore those other opportunities, because it may be that there is a way for you to apply for that funding. You just need to think strategically and a bit smarter and network and find somebody who can partner with you. Yeah. Okay, all right. When should you not apply for a funding opportunity, and what are the red flags, I guess, for that?
You should not apply if you can't answer the questions, or if you are trying to just fit your program into what you think they want. So it goes back to what we said before. You have to be aligned with what the mission of the client is, and if you're aligned with that, and you think that you have a great solution that will help, then that's when you should apply.
I think you have to think of grants as a business decision within the not-for-profit all the time. So governments really want not-for-profits to have a bit more of a corporate approach and be more organised that way as well. So if you're not ready, don't apply for grant. My tip.
The same applies for tenders, and so you'll see that there is a bit of a shift at the moment where there's not as many grants and there's more in the tender space. So they are shifting, the government are shifting that a little bit as well. So, and they're really similar, but you need to think like commercially a little bit more sometimes.
Just a really quick point there. I've actually been on one of those tables where all the grant applications come in. And they divide it up and they're put around all the offices to go through. The objective is to knock out the grants, to knock out the applications as quickly as possible that aren't eligible. That's the name of the game, to bring the numbers down. But anything that doesn't cover off on the basic eligibility is out.
Should it also in there, we should look at internal resources to manage that grant before we go applying for it? Is that a red flag for that people should consider as well?
Yeah, it'll always take you more time and money than you anticipate. So I think you have to make sure that you're expecting that this is going to be hard work, like especially a big one, that you're going to need. You're going to need different people, break it up into the organisation, different people's skill sets, who can answer what parts and so forth. Have those experts, or go externally and get somebody to help you.
Okay, so, and I think this comes back to what you were talking about, Martin, is that some tips on the internal funding approval process. When do we apply and when do we not apply, and what kind of criteria should we set up internally that we can use again and again? And that applies to big and small organisations.
The most sought after position on a not-for-profit board, I can guarantee you, is the treasurer. And they're also the hardest to find a good one. So once you find a good one, they will unlock all the information you need going forward on the grants the money that you have available in the coffers and money that you're spending. And that's the business side of what I'm trying to talk about. If you're projecting forward for a grant, that might be $50, $60, $10,000 even, $5,000. I mean, they're trying to forward project what that money will do within the organisation. So it's about spinning plates in some way. That's why I'm saying that applying for a grant is a business decision within a not-for-profit.
Do you want to add anything to that? All right. What would be your tips on partners, supporters, who externally do you need to get on site to strengthen your application, and do we need evidence of that, or what's going to get you across the line that little bit extra?
With you, Jillian.
Yeah, that's okay. Look, I was thinking about this, and I've got an example of one that we just did recently for a tender for the Summer Foundation. So it was for some disability housing to take disabled people, adolescents out of aged care and build a disability housing for them. And one of the things that we did to try and set us apart was the land that they were looking at. We actually went to the landowner and we got a partnership agreement in place with that landowner as to why this would be a great option and why they would want to partner with the Summer Foundation over somebody else. And so it's looking at really what are those real strategic partnerships. If you're going to pull something together that will get you them thinking, oh, hang on a minute, like this sets this apart, and this is a great idea. Why would go with them over somebody else?
I think people should know who's who in the zoo. So within your sector, well, even locally, do you know who your MPs are? State and federal? Do you know who the minister is for the department that you deal with within your sector? Do you know if there are any sub departments that also deal in that space. You know if there's any local representatives of that department. I'm not saying you should ring your local MP or go around to their house or try and. I would make sure that you know who they are though, because that could be a strategic approach if you've got a project you would like supported. And I'm saying don't wear that out. It's really important that you just don't be a constant contact.
One of the other things that happens, so we do tenders across everything from big, large infrastructure tenders all the way through to not-for-profit. One of the things that happens in that bigger end is that like big construction companies, they'll be one day competing against each other, but the next day they'll partner together and apply. So even though you might, like your not-for-profit might be doing something similar to somebody else's, you can partner together and apply. So you don't have to do it alone. It gives you more strength, it gives you more bodies to, respond properly, all of those sorts of things. So don't be afraid to do that. Always be competing, try and see where you can partner together.
A bit of a hack on the ministers as well. Don't say that I told you this, because I'll just deny it. Is if you go to their page and you can see what portfolios they've had in the past. Sometimes that can also be a little bit of an unlock as well.
And the importance of client support, remembering that we're outcome based and that I guess the centre of everyone's mission and vision is what we're doing for our clients. Is some kind of testimonial or client support for your tender or your project worthwhile getting as well?
Yeah, look, I think it's always good to have support and testimonials, and that your reputation is, speaks for itself. You need to make sure there's an area within the response that is needed as well. So don't just try and be forcing that in there just for the sake of it. Yeah, but definitely. But you can put some of that on your website. They'll, want to see who you are anyway, and bits and pieces. Yeah.
Always have testimonials. Yeah, for sure. We're a not-for-profit ourselves, and we also apply for grant funding with projects ourselves. Always required to gather testimonials.
And that's something that can be sitting on the shelf ready to go as well?
Not really. You could probably have some generic ones that Jillian mentioned, because some of them are going to be project specific.
Mm-hmm.
Letters of support, especially in the grant space, letters of support are like key.
Okay. Thank you both for coming today. I'm just mindful of the time and open the floor to questions and answers. But just to finally, to finish off, when should people look to engage your services as such? And I know that in our NFT space, we try to do everything alone, but sometimes it is actually more cost effective not to do it by ourselves in the long term. So just want to open that up to you guys.
Yeah, look, we support, as I've said, everybody from big, large tenders all the way through to not-for-profit grants, anything that's competitive business. So that might just be an unsolicited proposal that you're trying to put to somebody as well. So we do right through from coordinating, so strategic management, all the way through to writing. So there's the graphic design, all of that sort of stuff. So there's a team that works in our business, and they're all very skilled at that. I just do the nice people fluffy thing and let them do the hard work. But, I'll use an example. So Kimberly from Kind of Prelude, she came to us the other week. They had a tender that came out. It was a really short turnaround. And what we did for them was we just spent 5 hours we reviewed it. We just had a look that they were answering those questions compliantly, and gave some suggestions and so forth. And just, some tips and tricks, I guess. We're seeing this stuff all of the time. And so, we can help in all different ways depending on what you want, right through from doing the whole thing to just giving you a few tips. So, but one of the things that did come out of that is that a couple of the team in Hunter Prelude reached out to me and asked about how do they develop their skills. So one of the things I wanted to mention today is that we run a skills development. It's a 2-day intensive program that helps basically show you how we do this. So we have like a bronze where you just write every brain, dump it, and then silver and gold. So we whole strategy on how you do it and where you need to get to and timelines of it. And we teach you all of that in the skills development. We can fit it into the not-for-profit. So if anyone's interested in that, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and reach out. If we can get a minimum of 5 in the Hunter, then I can get somebody brought in for the day to run it for the 2 days. So, cool.
Yeah, thanks. As I said, this has been around for over 35 years now. We are a not-for-profit. We deliver business connect services through the so we're paid to deliver business advisory services. I deal personally with anyone with a thought bubble and all the way up to corporates. So come along and ask me questions. I'm pretty much a whipping boy, so come along. As long as you're registered for the program due to COVID that impacted last year, we were able to provide about 60 hours of free business advice.
All right, so, you know, those resources are available to you, so you can reach out to them as well. I'm sure they'd love a copy. Okay, we'll open the floor up for questions. This is your opportunity. Anyone wants to ask something?
There's always one, isn't there?
I'll just stand up here. Thinking of breakfast, that's all right. My name is Michelle Faithful. I'm from Compass Housing. We're a community housing provider, and it's interesting just hearing you talk about the steps to, we're a not-for-profit organisation, obviously, but when you talked about the decision to become a registered charity, it's like we run a program for disadvantaged youth at Compass, so we facilitate this program. And there's been lots of talk about it becoming a charity in its own right. And I guess I thought I'd throw the question out there. I know it's probably a big one to answer, but do we or don't we? You know, we're often obviously applying for funding for the program under the device of Compass Housing, which is a pretty, you know, we're self-funded and we do okay. So, you know, our books might not necessarily, we've funded this program for many years, and we're now wanting to expand it. So there's talk about, you know, what do you do? Do you actually go through that whole process of becoming a charity in its own right? Is it worth it, you think? Yeah.
As I said before, it's a case-by-case basis, and that sounds like you just need to sit around and hash it out. And I'm happy to do that with you. Just need someone just to talk about. And I'm really big on the scenarios. What would happen to do this? What would happen to this? And the old pros and cons list always comes out. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, look you up.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything? Have you got anything about hospice and stuff? Do you want to say anything?
It's not best. She's also one of the best consultants, isn't it? Country. Well,
No pressure. No pressure.
I guess I was took a lot from what you both said, but also sitting here as a business advisor, but also with a board hat on, thinking about watching assisted in a board capacity with their grant decisions, and I think you can't underestimate the importance of the planning step before you get into the application, and just staying true to your business strategy. And it's, you know, it's all of what you're saying, but it's, you know, you can find that you're down the track a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you've taken funding, and all of a sudden what you're doing is the purpose of what your strategy was, and probably similarly on your point, Michelle, it's how's that fit within the Compass strategy? I mean, it's a standalone strategy, and, you know, what are your terms of reference to Compass, and what's the point on why you break it out or keep it in? The opportunity of it going standalone. Anyway.
I know that not-for-profits, particularly small ones, always scrambling. It's not easy. One bit of advice if I could offer, and you probably know this already, so forgive me, is that you can try and muscle up your board as much as you can, but as much expertise on there as possible. And again, I know it's easy. but there are resources out there. Rick, if I could recommend a couple, that's okay. Obviously, the local resource here, the NFP Connect one, but there are broader ones such as Pro Bono Australia. NFP Law is a really, really good one. If you haven't heard of that organisation as well. If I could just flag, like, and it's a big red flag to me, do not use organisations such as Grants Assist. They are there just to take your money. They will provide you a list and nothing that you'll be probably eligible for.
There's lots of websites like Grants Hub and the other one, the Funding Network.
Grants Connect is the government gateway.
Oh yeah, yeah. So there's lots of different kind of places that you can purchase subscriptions to, and they give you grants. Port Stephens email, they've got a really great, if you're not on the Port Stephens email, and we'll put all this in an email. So I'm going to get with the team and we'll put it all together. But just on the Auspice thing, just to extend it, there's 650, 700,000 charities in Australia. I'm very anti, if someone comes to me, which happens often, for you to start a new charity, because I feel like if it's just, we start it with the heart in mind, but then as Megan said, like you kind of get beyond the purpose of what we're doing. And so I think that it's about making sure under the auspice, so it's a memorandum of understanding. So for example, if I'm starting up a child's charity that's going to help intervention, early intervention, I might partner with kind of Prelude or First Chance and say, I'm going to work with you, and they, for any funding that I get, apply for under my auspice, I will give you 10% of the funding, which is not unreasonable because you're using all the things that they want. So just being mindful that that auspice, and then back to the business thing, that might be the same. You just have a memorandum of understanding of how that's going to work. So when we did the collaboration with all the funders, so last year there were 7 businesses, you know, Greater Foundation, Beyond Bank, Spark Hillmore, Hunter Water. We had a memorandum of understanding on how we would function as a group of funders to support what they were going to support, which was drought relief. There had to be specific criteria about what it was going to be like, how it was going to look, what that looked like. So you were really there to do that. It was all done before you started the process, because if you couldn't get through that memorandum of understanding, you're not going to get through an auspice partnership. So it's just a really great way of kind of going down. Does anyone have any other questions?
Keep it quick. Some councils also subscribe to Grant Guru. So
Yeah.
some of those resources.
Yeah, I'll put some of these links in if there's anything else that anyone sort of has already got resources to. Any questions? No? I'm going to ask one quick question. Breaking down a grant or a tender, a lot of the issues that people, not-for-profits and charities have, or businesses even, is the whole administration versus the actual. So you're going to, I need you to fund a play group. How would you break that down in regards to it costs this much per person so that I can then apply for that grant given that? It doesn't have to be that particular thing, but how would you, is there some creative ways in which you've broken down the resource like that? Here's how we're applying for the grant.
I think that comes from when I talked before about your strategy at the start. You have to have a really clear strategy on what you're doing. So that comes back to what you were talking about before as well. You know, you need to go, this is our strategy of how we're doing it, and part of that is the value and how you're going to bring that value back to what they're trying to achieve as well. I think that's probably how we start it, and that can be, you know, from like business models all the way through to competitive pricing models and so forth. That really depends on what you're applying for and what that strategy is to win that business.
That would include some pretty simple benchmarking and seeing what's already out there as well.
Yeah.
It is tough passing, and I know that everyone is keen to get back to work and start looking at those tenders and grants and other funding opportunities. But if you have got the opportunity to stay and network, I think we also talked about the importance of that networking, knowing who else is out there and that collaboration as well. But I really want to thank Jillian and Martin for their time this morning. I know in particular, poor Jillian's been, well, we were lucky to have her. She is East Melbourne and managed to get here for us. But again, they are great resources. They are local. Use them if need be. And, you know, thank you very much for coming along today. I hope that you've got some tips to take away with you, and look forward to seeing you at the next breakfast. And did you want to wrap up or good?
You can wrap up. I think we're good.
We're good? All right.
Say goodbye to everyone then.
And goodbye, everybody who is joining us today on Zoom. And again, we would love to see you in person next time as well. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.